Rubio.
Thank you. And the thing that concerns me, well, let me share a story with you about a company, a small company in Florida. They got hacked. Criminals got into their system, basically stole all of their client data and information, took it all, and then basically contacted them and said, we know how much you can afford to pay. We have your financial information. You need to pay us. You need to pay us in Bitcoin if you want all of this back, or you won't be able to operate. And they went to the FBI, according to them. I haven't talked to the FBI about this case, and the FBI basically told them, you should pay them because you're not going to get your data back, and if you don't. And so they did. They went out and bought, I think it was $250,000 of Bitcoin, and paid them, and they got their information back, and were able to continue to operate. So they had their financials, they knew what they had in the bank and what they could afford to pay, and they based their demands on it. We'll never know who stole their money, but it's gone. And it was damaging to that company, as you can well imagine. Now, if that had been if we had a rash of people breaking in to companies and stealing cash out of safes, we would be all talking about it. In this particular case, they probably didn't even want to publicize it, which is why I don't say who the business is, because their clients are probably concerned about it. We don't have a lot to do to help them. And their bigger challenges in the future, they've gotten a little better at what they're doing, but they cannot afford to have the sort of IT division to protect them again in the future. And is the story I've just outlined, do you think, number one, just from the experiences that you've all had, is this happening more than we know, in essence? Are businesses experiencing this, but basically not filing a quote-unquote police report the way they would a normal theft because A, there's nothing law enforcement can do to help them, and B, it's not the kind of thing they want people to know about? Do you think this is do you think it's common and underreported?
I do. I think more and more small businesses don't want to talk about it because it does damage their reputation and it can have a really adverse effect. But the other thing is reaching out to the right law enforcement and what you need to do and having processes. This morning I was at a session, the Secret Service was there. Unbeknownst to me, they can assist and help, and we were talking about that earlier. So I think it's really important for companies to understand when you do experience a breach, who can I reach out to and what is the best next steps? Because if they don't have a plan in place, you're in panic mode, right? I mean, your business is at risk. You've lost your data if you don't have substantial backup. So it is something I think is a problem and needs to be addressed.
I'd echo that. I think it's very underreported. We never contacted law enforcement at all in our situation. Of course, we recovered most of the information, but we're unique in the sense that we didn't have all of our customer databases were off-site, so I'm comfortable talking with you about it. But I think you're right. I think people are embarrassed, and they're concerned it will have a negative impact on their business, and so they just don't talk about it. So it's an underreported issue, but it's got to be impacting our economy. I know it is.
And the follow-up, the other thing that's devastating about it is if that business happens to do work for governments, be it or healthcare, some of the information that's being stolen is proprietary healthcare records, billing records, the like, and in the case of government contracts, whether it's DOD or the space industry that's trying to expand to bring in more small businesses as suppliers, the inability to meet certain criteria for cybersecurity because of the governmental, forget about classified, just the governmental component of it, could potentially begin to disqualify smaller companies because they cannot afford to build up the cyber capability necessary to be able to service the client. And so is that also something that people are running into in the small business world, where the cost of building up the sort of IT security they need is too high and therefore prohibits them from certain types of work that might now or in the future have certain minimum IT strength requirements that they can't afford to purchase?
I'll comment maybe first. I mean, it's a challenge, I think, right now for any small business to comply with all the different federal security regulations at the same level that agencies are expected to require. I think agencies are struggling with the same issue. I think it's feasible to put together a cybersecurity plan. The problem is most small businesses don't have the capability.
Don't have the fund, they can't afford it.
They can't afford it, and they don't have the, I think, even skill set to start putting it together.
You know, I would just mention that we have actually had customers, when we have worked with them on an assessment and looked at what needed to be done, have decided not to do work with the DOD because of the expense in complying with the 800-171. It's just not something they can justify when they weigh it.
And I guess this is just a statement, and I think you guys would agree with this. If we are serious about expanding more government contracting work to small businesses because we want to have a broader base of suppliers, then part of that program needs to be assisting companies with the costs, small companies with the costs of, and the capability of being able to meet the criteria that we require of them. If we're in earnest trying to attract more suppliers and small business providers to do work in the space industry or for defense, the only way that's going to happen is if we help them to meet some of these criteria that on their own they cannot afford.
Right. Some of the larger companies are, in fact, realizing that that's a problem because they realize that they have problems in the supply chain and in their vendor management. And they are looking at public and private ways to do it. For example, Federal Express came to us and made a contribution to us in order to do the Cybersecure Your Business program. And they asked to have one of their trainings done in Memphis, where they have a lot of small business contractors. And we also asked to do one in Charlotte, where they also have a significant presence. So they were very proactive. They were very good corporate citizens in realizing that they were getting a twofer. One is they were helping small businesses be safer themselves and be able to compete with larger ones, but at the same time, they were protecting their own business model because they would be able to do business in a supply chain with a better degree of assurance that they were dealing with people who took cybersecurity as seriously as they did.
Shocked to hear that the private sector is ahead of the federal government on something like that, as we all are. Thank you, Senator Rubio. Senator